Central Committee meeting of Parliament to discuss the draft National Ordnance Budget 2026. CBCS President Richard Dornbosch, Economics and Statistics at Central Bank of Curaçao and Sint Maarten, MP Darryl York, speaking to Patrice Gums, Minister plans to conduct a forecast capacity study, statement of the Ministry of Justice. Fatal traffic accident. From the island, Sint Maarten, this is SXM Daily News for June 26, 2026. Marinka Gums, Minister of Finance, at a Central Committee meeting of Parliament to discuss the draft National Ordnance Budget 2026, other financial legislation, and the composition of travel delegations. The House of Parliament will sit in a Central Committee meeting on June 26, 2026.
As Minister of Finance, it is my duty to present the financial roadmap for our country. But before we discuss the numbers, the policy priorities, and the economic outlook, permit me to first address the elephant in the room. This budget is being presented later than it should have been. I want to be clear. While this is not a new phenomenon, it is my intention that it will be the last time a national budget is presented this late under my leadership. For many years, across successive administrations, our budget cycle has been affected by structural and political challenges. Today, that cycle ends. I offer no excuses, nor do I seek to assign blame. I take full ownership of my role and responsibility as Minister of Finance, as well as my responsibility to strengthen the system that governs the preparation and submission of the national budget. The reality is that the system itself has not consistently supported timely delivery. Deadlines have proven difficult to maintain, responsibilities have not always been clearly enforced throughout the budget process, and accountability has not been strong enough to prevent delays from affecting the final outcome. Public frustration is justified, but so is optimism. A better way is possible, and that is precisely what this government has been working to achieve. The 2026 budget cycle was long and demanding, but it did not labor in vain. Throughout this process, we identified structural bottlenecks, strengthened coordination across government, and fundamentally changed the way the budget is prepared. The budget also marks an important milestone in another respect. I wish, as Minister of Finance, to acknowledge Member of Parliament Artwell Arian, under whose leadership the transition to policy-based budgeting was initiated during his tenure as Minister of Finance. That work laid out the foundation for the reforms we continue today. The budget before you is the first national budget prepared under the policy-based budgeting framework, representing an important step toward a budgeting process that more clearly links public spending to government's policy objectives and measurable results. The work is already yielding results. The 2027 budget process began months earlier than in previous years. Ministries have been engaged well in advance, and the necessary structures are now in place to support the timely preparation and submission of future budgets. This budget, therefore, represents more than the government's financial priorities. It reflects a government that is willing to learn from the past, correct what was not working, and build stronger institutions for the future. During the course of this budget presentation, I will also provide Parliament with an update on the progress of the 2027 national budget and the steps being taken to ensure its timely completion. Madam Chair, despite the delay in its arrival, the document before you represents a historic milestone for Sint Maarten. For the very first time in our nation's history, the national budget has been designed and organized around a policy-based budgeting approach. For years, traditional budgeting in St. Martin was a line item exercise. We came to Parliament and showed you what we were spending money on: salaries, office supplies, rent, utilities, etc. This year, we are fundamentally changing the conversation. We are no longer simply presenting expenditures. We are explaining why resources are being allocated, what concrete outcomes we expect to achieve for the people, and how every single guilder aligns with our strategic policy objectives. This is a massive leap forward for stronger governance by shifting from short-term spending to long-term planning. This approach similarly offers greater accountability as it gives Parliament the exact benchmarks needed to measure whether the government is actually delivering on its promises. Finally, policy-based budgeting allows for more transparent public finances by giving the public the opportunity to see a direct line between the taxes they pay and the societal improvements we achieve. In fact, Madam Chair, we are shifting the focus from inputs to impact. To understand our policy choices, we must look at our current economic reality. St. Martin's economy has shown resilience, but we remain highly vulnerable to external shocks, such as the war in Iran, and that has had a devastating effect on world oil prices, inflation, and climate realities. Our revenue projections are realistic. We are not banking on windfall formatting or burdening our citizens with higher tax rates. Instead, our focus is on widening the tax base, improving tax compliance, and modernizing our tax collection infrastructure. Madam Chair, let us look at the hard realities of the fiscal framework we are establishing. Compared to the 2025 framework, which saw 586 million Caribbean guilders in income and 577 million Caribbean guilders in expenditures, the 2026 budget reflects a significantly expanding financial framework. For 2026, we are projecting total revenues of $646 million and operating expenditures of $636 million. I am pleased to note that on an operational level, this is a balanced and healthy budget yielding an operational surplus of $11 million. This means we are meeting our day-to-day commitments with the money we bring in. However, governance requires vision. To truly build resilience, we have $164.6 million in capital investments allocated to the year 2026, while our total commitments across all frameworks reach $632 million. We are handling this transparently through targeted capital borrowing and investment tools, not by squeezing the taxpayer. We are borrowing strictly to build, not to cover operational waste.
The police force of St. Martin, KPSM, is seeking the assistance of the general public in locating Shamar Hodge, a 16-year-old boy who has been reported missing. According to the information received, Shamar left his residence on Montevideo Drive shortly after 11 p.m. on Wednesday, June 24, 2026. At the time he left home, he was wearing a shirt and pajama bottoms and was not wearing shorts. Shamar was born on St. Martin and is a student at the Charlotte Brookson Academy. He is described as being of slim build, with a dark complexion. KPSM is asking anyone who may have seen Shamar or who has any information regarding his whereabouts to immediately contact the police station at +1 721 542 2222 or call 911. Shamar, if you see this message, please contact your guardian as soon as possible at +1 721 522 0032 so that your family knows you are safe. The Ministry of Justice is aware of the public concern surrounding the departure from St. Martin of an individual connected to a fatal traffic incident and recognizes the profound loss and grief experienced by the family affected and the wider community. A fatal incident of this nature has impacted many, and understandably, questions have arisen regarding how the matter has been handled and the decisions that followed. We would, however, like to draw attention to the structure of St. Martin's justice systems, as different authorities hold their respective responsibilities as prescribed by the law. The separation of authorities exists to safeguard the integrity of investigations, protect the rights of all parties involved, including victims, and ensure that decisions are made independently and in accordance with the law. The investigation and prosecution of criminal offences, including decisions on arrest, pre-trial detention, and whether to bring or continue a prosecution, are the responsibility of the Public Prosecutor's Office and, where detention is concerned, the examining judge. The Minister of Justice neither directs nor receives the file of an active investigation. The Minister's role in this matter was limited to the immigration file and application of St. Martin's immigration laws. In accordance with standard procedure, the individual's immigration file was assessed independently and on its own merits under St. Martin's admittance, residence, and expulsion framework. By law, the criminal investigation file was not part of that assessment and could not be considered. When a person who does not hold lawful residence is released from custody by the competent authorities, immigration law applies in the ordinary course, and removal follows where the legal criteria are met. The actions taken in this case were therefore based on the individual's immigration status and the minister's legal responsibility to enforce the immigration laws. The removal was not a consequence of prison capacity or detention limitations. Any suggestion to that effect is incorrect. Departure from St. Martin does not bring a criminal case to an end. Under our criminal procedure, a defendant who does not appear can be summoned and tried in absentia, and the court may render judgment. A summons with a court date was issued. The continuation of the criminal matter, including any decision to prosecute, remains the responsibility of the Public Prosecutor's Office. Prime Minister Dr. Luc Mercelina, in his capacity as Acting Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labour, VSA, officially administered the oath of office to Ms. Xaviera Doki as a pharmacist assistant during a ceremony held on Monday, June 22, 2026, at Orange Grove Pharmacy. The ceremony marks the Prime Minister's first official swearing-in of a healthcare professional since assuming the responsibilities of Acting Minister of VSA. It underscores the Ministry's continued commitment to safeguarding professional standards within St. Martin's healthcare sector. In accordance with the applicable legal requirements, pharmacist assistants must take the prescribed oath before the Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labour before they are authorized to carry out their professional duties. The signed procès verbal of the swearing-in ceremony will be submitted to His Excellency, the Governor of St. Martin, as part of the official process.
Are you SXM insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXM is cardless. Request your My SXM account today and enter the virtual office of SXM. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
SXM, yeah. Your social health insurances.
CBCS President Richard Doornbosch, Economics and Statistics at Central Bank of Curaçao and Sint Maarten, held a press conference in Sint Maarten on June 24, 2026, and said it is an initiative of the government of Sint Maarten. And it is important because we have to think about how we recover from a disaster the next time. And obviously we haven't seen a hurricane, fortunately, in Sint Maarten for the last 9 years or so. But of course, we have to prepare for the worst, and we know that given where Sint Maarten is in the hurricane belt. He explained,
And it is interesting, it is an initiative of the government of Sint Maarten, and it is important because we have to think about how we recover from a disaster the next time. And obviously we haven't seen a hurricane, fortunately, in Sint Maarten for the last 9 years or so. But of course we have to prepare for the worst, and we know that given where Sint Maarten is in the hurricane belt, that we have to make sure that we are prepared. And what we've seen after Irma, and you knew this already before, is that this period just after when the hurricane hits is very important. It's very important because of the emergency relief that is required, but it is also important because the damage is not only the physical damage, but it's also the loss of not being able to operate your economy to the fullest extent. And so the sooner you are back up and running again, the lower the losses will be. So the estimates for Hurricane Irma from the World Bank are that loss and damages around was almost 5 billion guilders, and that is, if I understand correctly, roughly 50% is physical damages, 50% is losses. And these are sums of money that, of course, you cannot save for that kind of an impact. So you have to make sure that the impact is as low as possible. And of course you have to insure, so private enterprise needs to insure. But what the government can do is think about their post-disaster financial architecture. So what are the urgent expenditure that you need to do in order to make sure that your economy is back up as soon as possible. And then the thing that Sint Maarten has considered and is considering now, that we have written the article on, is to create a disaster reserve fund that is funded. So the funding is coming from the repayment of the loan that was given by the government of Sint Maarten to the airport. And that's around 144 guilders. And if you add the interest, that's also, so both repayment and interest, that amounts to around 176 million guilders that will come in over a period of 15 years' time. And so this will start in 2028. And this will provide this opportunity to think about how you can do your post-disaster financing in a better way. And that's already an instrument in Sint Maarten that is in place at the moment. And that is the CRIF, that is also mentioned here. That's the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Fund. And that has a similar principle. And so basically what is good about this fund, it can pay out fast. So it should pay out in 14 days. And the reason why it can pay out this fast is because it's not sort of trying to assess what the real damage is, but it is paying out just based on parametric measurements. So if the wind speed is faster than a certain amount, or if the earthquake is so much on a scale of Richter, or if the flooding is more than so many centimeters per hour, then the insurance pays out because then the disaster is considered to be eligible for this payout. And that allows the fund to pay out very quickly, and therefore the government that is insuring itself through this facility to make sure that there is emergency relief, that the critical infrastructure gets repaired very quickly, but also that essential public services are in place and are in place quickly.
The Minister referred to follow up with VSA, understand how the Minister plans to conduct a forecast capacity study and what data is readily available to the Ministry. I understand the Minister would say, this is not something the Ministry of VROMI, on their own, and will be across on 2 data points that we have in the rest. You guys have to look at Minister, I think, by you, to come to number US space, come to have a holistic view of what? MP Darrell York remarks from the floor of Parliament on June 22nd, 2026.
Answering one of the questions pertaining to mortality trends, etc., the Minister referred us to follow up with VSA. But Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to understand how the Minister is planning to conduct a forecast capacity study and not have all the data readily available to himself in his ministry. I understand if the Minister were to say, okay, this is not something the Ministry of VROMI can do on their own, and it will be a cross-ministry or something between VROMI and VSA. But to just say, okay, this is just the 1 or 2 data points that we have, and the rest, you guys will have to look at VSA. Minister, I think via you, Mr. Chairman, to come to a number, to come to a space, to have a holistic view of what is to come, you need to know the data that is there. And if you don't know the data, I don't understand how are you planning for the future in realizing these things if you're referring us to VSA when you're the one executing via you, Mr. Chairman. Also, the Minister referred to new burial management practices. So basically, after the new burying ground is open, they will be doing repurposing or whatever the cul-de-sac burial ground. So basically, families that have their loved ones there, what are they to expect with that explanation? Is it that the remains were going to be exhumed? What is to be expected by saying new burial management practices and policies for the existing cul-de-sac cemetery? I also asked for an update on the KB cemetery. I didn't really get that from the Minister as yet. Maybe he forgot it, but I would like to have an update on that. And Mr. Chairman, one thing that's reoccurring, and I understand if it's not in pen yet, but I have yet to hear any projected timelines, any dates. Everything is up in the air. Everything is still being discussed. Everything is still being planned. But the Minister has been speaking on these things for the better half of a year now. So if we can't get a date to when he expects to start the public consultations for the new burying ground, when the new burying ground is going to be open, there's no formal end date for the current burying ground, but basically by now they were supposed to know what the capacity or the formal capacity is and what they could be able to add from that as it relates to the amount of burials per month, how long that's going to last. I think something should be available, maybe not an exact timeline for it to be closed, but basically, hey, we got 6 months, we got a year, that we don't have to worry because people out there are worried, Minister. So can the Minister give some type of information that people can actually hold on to and that's tangible?
Patrice Gums, Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, VROMI, speaking in the House of Parliament, then indicated that indeed there's a location where these can be found. Indicated that if a return is necessary, that's possible. But I also indicated that when it comes to the topics around mortality trends, that being said, the best, most competent authority would be the Minister of VSA, as that information itself was not communicated to us. If it is indeed available, the most efficient way of handling would be through the Minister of VSA.
I think I just want to clarify, when I stated the referral to the Minister of VSA, I stated in my responses the information that we have received at the time of request of the answers was that there's no mortality trends. On the floor of Parliament today, the MPs indicated that indeed there's a location of where these can be found. MP Janssen, through you, Mr. Chairman, indicated that if a return is necessary, that's possible, but I also then indicated that when it comes to the topics around mortality trends, that then the best, most competent authority would be the Minister of VSA, as that information itself was communicated not be available to us. If it is indeed available, the most efficient way of handling would be to the Minister of VSA. That was where the point of my suggestion came from, not that I am passing on the responsibility, of course, but as I stated, we know how much people are buried every month. We don't know the cause. We don't know necessarily where everyone ends up, because that's not necessarily within the data we collect. We don't collect in the Ministry of Romy that someone died from a particular disease or not. We just compile how many people are buried, and that information has been communicated, 14 to 18. If a more thorough discussion around mortality, i.e. health, i.e. cause of death, i.e. where people are going diaspora-wise, immigration-wise, then that has to be taken up by the competent authorities who have that type of information. I, of course, can come back with the information from those relevant ministers, but if the objective is to get an efficient and clear answer, it would actually make a lot more sense to have the competent minister or ministers present that have that data, and the conversation and responses can come a lot more efficiently and faster. So that was just a bit of clarification to what I said when I indicated the need for the data and other ministers coming along as well. This is also why, as stated, the Ministry of Romy, and I think it's very important to recognize the request of timelines is well noted and taken. I think it's also very important to recognize that the belief of having a closure date for the cul-de-sac cemetery is not possible, simply because we currently don't have any other public cemetery that's readily available for all persons of all denominations, of all backgrounds. Other cemeteries are limited in terms of who they actually accept. Second to that, I think it's very important to look at the question within the timeline of what has taken place. We recently purchased Belvedere Remainder. It will be talked about in the questions related to the housing. We recently finalized a land analysis. So I think to ask the questions about costing, exactly where things are going to go, it is premature, as stated in the presentation and responses, because all of these things are currently happening now. Has there been a discussion for a very long time about this parcel of land? Indeed, even before my mandate, but I think it's important to recognize what has happened within this year alone. We've purchased land and we've analyzed land this year alone. So I think to look at how many houses actually can go where, the cost of those houses, those are things that I already indicated and will indicate in this presentation are the next steps. Those include mobilization, realization, of course, financing. Financing isn't something that we have right top of our head, because as the housing policy rightfully indicates, the future of housing is not solely in the hands of government. The future of housing is a multi-stakeholder approach that includes government but also private sector. So how much funding and financing is needed also depends on who takes the lead in what intervention. So I think, and I want to make it very clear, the possibility of indicating how many houses where, as well as exactly the cost of those things, we cannot give those now because we're now doing our research. The land was purchased this year. Analysis took place from January until just last week, 2 weeks ago, and that has been finalized and now being reviewed for operationalization as well as financing as well. So I do hear the call of the MP through you, Mr. Chairman, about the urgency, but I think it's very important to recognize that while we have an urgent need, the ministry is doing short-term initiatives within the existing cul-de-sac cemetery, as indicated, additional vaults where the hospital medical waste used to go. These are short-term interventions that we already know can carry at least a certain amount of time, but to give a conclusive date of where we're going to close the cemetery, that of course depends on when we have a new area that's properly financed to actually manage a new cemetery.
for the weather forecast, tonight through Saturday midday. Fair to partly cloudy with isolated showers. Surface winds, tonight through Saturday midday. East-northeast to east-southeast, with a light to moderate breeze at 6 to 15 mph. State of the sea, slight waves, swells, 2 to 4 feet. Outlook through Sunday midday. Variably cloudy with isolated showers, and now your 3-day forecast.
Savvy, your social and health insurance is Savvy, your social and health insurance is.
Are you SXV insured? Do you have a valid medical insurance status? SXV is cardless. Request your My SXV account today and enter the virtual office of SXV. Go to sxv.sx and sign up now.
Savvy, yeah, your social and health insurance is.
Willemstad, Curaçao may have been eliminated from the FIFA World Cup on Thursday, but across social media, the island has emerged as one of the tournament's most celebrated underdog stories. As supporters reflected on the Blue Waves' historic debut, one message shared thousands of times summed up the feelings of football fans around the world. Respect forever for the Curaçao national team. The tribute praised Curaçao for becoming the smallest nation ever to qualify for a FIFA World Cup, a remarkable achievement for an island of just over 155,000 inhabitants. Fans highlighted the milestones that made the Blue Waves' journey unforgettable. Curaçao scored its first ever World Cup goal against Germany, earned its first World Cup point with a historic draw against Ecuador, and entered its final group stage match against Ivory Coast still with a chance of reaching the knockout rounds. For many football supporters, those accomplishments mattered far more than the final standings. Respect for a team that won only 1 point and was eliminated in the group stage? Absolutely, one widely shared post-read. We will never forget the team of heroes that represented a nation of barely 155,000 people. One of the tournament's defining moments came during Curaçao's match against Ecuador, when goalkeeper Eloy Room produced an astonishing 15 saves to preserve a historic 0-0 draw. The performance quickly became one of the most talked-about individual displays of the World Cup. Fans also paid tribute to head coach Dick Advocaat, who fulfilled his dream of coaching at football's biggest tournament after overcoming difficult personal moments involving his daughter's health. Images of the veteran Dutch coach showing emotion during the tournament resonated with supporters across the globe. Perhaps the most touching part of the viral message captured what many neutrals felt about Curaçao's World Cup adventure. Thank you for everything, Curaçao. Sometimes, even in defeat, you win. The post concluded with a powerful tribute to the Blue Waves' impact on the sport. This is where the entire football world stands up and applauds. Although Curaçao's World Cup ended in the group stage, the island leaves the tournament with something far more enduring than points. It earned worldwide admiration for its courage, determination, and fighting spirit, while inspiring a nation that came together behind its team. For a small Caribbean island, making its first appearance on football's biggest stage, the Blue Wave proved that dreams can become reality, and that success is measured not only by victories, but by the hearts a team touches along the way. This is our SXM Daily Newscast. Thank you for joining us.